All right, Preds Power Hour on a Friday. We're back. Bryan Bastin is here, as he is every week. Bryan, good morning, sir. How are you?
I'm doing pretty fantastic. How are you doing?
Not too bad. Jumping from one thing to the next. I feel like it's hotter this week in East Tennessee than it's been in a little bit. Like, I am dying get in and out of my car. Campus is booming. A lot of folks, so for the good folks wondering, is Tennessee back? Tennessee is indeed back. People forget. I'm excited to be inside Neyland. Like, we're less than 2 weeks away from me being inside Neyland. Friday Night Lights is back, so I was back for Rivalry Thursday last night in Sevier County. That was a blast. More games to go to tonight. Very, very excited. Like, football is just back. That means the NBA will be back soon. That means hockey will be back soon. Like, the fall is just the best sports time. And it's just the excitement when you realize everything's coming back, because that lull we've been in summer where we've talked about, like, what do we talk about here? Like, we're running the bottom of the barrel here, because it's kind of a dead period for so many sports, and that's ending very soon.
Yes.
Nick Morgan, you're also here. Locked On Preds. How are you doing, sir?
Doing good. Chase, Bryan, thank you for having me. 100% agree with you with fall being the best sports season. Those first couple of weeks in September where college football's back on TV. You're starting to gear up for NFL. You hear NBA and NHL training camps starting to ramp up. You're into the weeds with a baseball season. So it just feels like this is approaching like Christmas morning for sports fans right around the corner.
Yeah, but for you, I think, Nick, it's a little bit of a different experience with your college football, because for me, I get super excited, I get real hype, and then usually around, week 2, week 3, it's like, oh, that's how this season's going to go. And so let's see if the Florida game, and then, lose the Florida game. It's kind of like, all right, well, I guess we're starting a little bit. Maybe not this year though, right, Chase?
Well, we'll see. I mean, we got the Smoky Grays, it looks like, for the Florida game, which I'm very excited about, that they're back. The Smoky Grays are just fantastic. And I didn't hate the dark mode that a lot of folks did last year. And for the people who didn't know, like, the reason that they had the white helmets is because the shipping and everything has just been horrific, that they couldn't get the helmets. So it was just like they had to make do with what they had. Now with the all black, I think it would look better. But I mean, the Smoky Grays are just top notch. I'm so excited for that one. And Tennessee actually has a good track record in Smoky Grays against Florida. Dobbs beat Florida in Smoky Grays, so that's something to keep in mind. But I mean, you're talking about the Florida game. I want to get through the Pitt game, week 2, like on the road in Pitt. Like, people are just overlooking that, and I'm like, Pitt's a better team than Florida this year. It's on the road. That they lost to Pitt last year. Let me get through week 2, and then I'll reassess where we're at.
Are you going up to the big house any this year there, Nick?
Possibly. Yeah. Maybe. Looking for a couple of weekends to go. Obviously, a lot of hockey stuff coming up that might interfere with the schedule, but got to make it to at least one game in Ann Arbor this year. I want to say they're going to be as good as they were last year, bringing a lot of people back, but they also just lost so many really good people, especially on the defensive side of the ball. But you know what? We can go 1-11. If that one is against Ohio State, it's a great season.
Hold on. You don't want to go 1-11. Nobody wants to go 1-11. You don't want to be 0-10, 0-11 going into the Ohio State game. You don't want that.
Wouldn't that be the most hilarious ending
of
a season ever?
That'd be rough.
Imagine Michigan getting stomped by Rutgers and Maryland and going out and hanging 42 on Ohio State.
Yeah, that would be.
I've never heard this take from a fan before. I've never heard that. I want to lose every game except for the rivalry game, and then just lay it on them. This is a new take.
Maybe that's a little bit of an exaggeration.
I don't know. In my 8 years at UT, I was just like, just give me one. Give me a one win against Florida, and I don't care what happens the rest of the year. But
now it's Bama. What would you give to beat Bama?
See, Bama's not. It's not Bama for me. It's Florida. I just want to get over the Florida hump, and it's like this year. For folks, Bama's Bama. It's inevitable. It's not a. It's just one of those things. Until Saban's gone, you take your lumps with Bama.
Yeah.
Florida is the one where it's Tennessee's been better than Florida.
Recently.
Say it again.
At least you've beaten Florida recently. That's.
You want to go through the history.
We've beaten wasn't that long ago.
That was it, though. So if you go
Yeah.
through it, I think Tennessee's beaten Florida
They beat
once
Florida
in the last
in
20 years.
Yep, in 2004 they beat them last year. Ron
Yep.
Zook. I went to school in 05, and we didn't beat them again until the Jawan Jennings game.
Yes.
Oh, that was Georgia. No, I'm talking about the
No.
Dobbs one.
Yeah.
Yes.
But we did beat Alabama one like 06, was it? It's like that
It's either
6-3
06 or
game.
05. I want to say it's 05. We should
Yeah.
have beat them in 09 with
Yeah.
friend of the pod, Jonathan Crompton, who was on yesterday, where they drove down 2-minute drill right there, easy field goal. Terrence Cody gets in, blocks it. Tennessee
That's right.
loses.
Yeah. But so like Nick was saying about Michigan losing a lot of players, they're good players last year, and they lost them to the draft, and we got draft news yesterday, right?
That is true. Yeah.
We do have draft news. So Nashville is hosting the draft. They're hosting the award show. Nick, what does that mean for Nashville? How big of a deal is this?
Well, first off, it's fantastic that the entire basically last week of June is going to be taken up by NHL hockey in Nashville. They said this is the first time since 2006 that the same city has hosted both the awards and the NHL draft. And I think it's going to be awesome. It really is. I think Nashville, and we've talked about this before, Nashville kind of knows how to throw a party when it comes to big events. And I think you're seeing a lot of sports leagues, entertainment, that kind of stuff start to recognize that. And I think more importantly, like players really want to go to like a fun city like Nashville, especially if it's the off season. Media really want to come here. You got, obviously scouts, celebrities that may be involved in some way with the award show. So it's becoming a little bit more of a destination. And I think that's super cool. And I think this is just another good example of the league starting to recognize how well Nashville kind of runs big events like this. You saw it last year with the Stadium Series, and you're seeing them again, rewarding it with both the draft and the awards.
Interesting. What do you think, Bryan?
Yeah, I mean, like he said, it's going to be really cool. I'm personally excited just because, this is, I've been covering games for a couple of years now, which is great. You get to see some people, every once in a while I get to see some really great writers that cover the other teams come into town, and it's really awesome. But, the entire hockey media world will be there, not just from all the teams, but you'll get international folks, which is one of my favorite, is when you get the international folks with some of the international players. I don't necessarily look forward to what downtown is going to be like that week, but I do work 2 blocks from Bridgestone now, so I've got my free parking at the very least. But it's going to be really, really exciting. I think, again, I've talked about our prospects guy over on the Forecheck, Eric. It'll be great because I think every scout, somebody, I know that a lot of scouts for teams follow him just to kind of get an idea. And so he'll probably know every single player that walks around and be like, oh yeah, that's this guy. He's been playing in the in Poland's 4th league, and he's got a great shot, and he's a great skater. So that'll be cool to see that. And but really, I mean, it's kind of feels like it's Nashville gets to be the center of the hockey world for basically a week, and it's really exciting, especially in that end of June where nothing else is going on.
Yeah.
So,
and when you're talking about drafts to get, you can't get much better than the 2023 NHL draft, because there's a lot of people that say this might be the best one, like kind of in our generation in terms of depth, especially depth at the top. Connor Bedard, there's a lot of people that saying he's kind of like that next generational talent. We'll have to see. But then the next 2 guys, Fantilli and Mishkov, those are 2 guys that probably would have gone number 1 in the draft this year. Either of them, if they came out this year. So you're going to have an all-star class. You're going to have a lot of rowdy fans for whoever the top 3 are coming into town, wanting to see who that number 1 pick is. It's probably going to be Bedard, but they're going to want to be there in person to celebrate. And again, like fans of other NHL teams just want to come to Nashville and hang out and party on Lower Broad, which means us natives are probably going to avoid Lower Broad for about 2.5 weeks. But you know what? It's fun, and it's good for the city, and it's good to kind of see, Nashville kind of on these sportsmen like that. Now, I will say, and I was talking about that this morning on the Locked On Predators podcast, if you're planning the NHL awards and you're planning some of the draft entertainment, please, something else besides country. Like, obviously, country is key to the Nashville identity, like, obviously, but there's so many other cool things in
What would you
Nashville
recommend?
to do. Yeah. Like, there's so many other things, like, that you can definitely kind of influence that.
Man,
What would you recommend, though?
Yeah.
Well, here's the thing. Like, remember how the Seattle Kraken did their expansion draft picks where they're like different celebrities all over town and they had one name on like the bottom of the fish, and Marshawn Lynch announced our boy Callie Yarncroke. You know, all of these like cool things. Yep, there you go. Like, wouldn't it be fun just to like see like somebody like pulling a name out in the middle of the Parthenon and being like, the Hart Trophy goes to so and so, or
Derrick
like,
Henry.
hey, how about this? Like, go to Loveless Cafe and put like Cale Makar's face in biscuit form, and he's like, and the Norris goes to, and then just there's a giant Makar biscuit.
Makar biscuit. Yeah.
Like, wouldn't like just something other than just like a Broadway band performing on stage during every break in every show.
So I will say, one, I have a counter for you. What if they feature Dolly Parton? Will you waive your no country rule?
Ooh.
I didn't say no country. I just said stuff other than country.
Okay.
Like, country's fine. Obviously, give me Dolly Parton all day.
I was gonna say, like, do I need to go get my Dollywood hat? That's somewhere around here. I need to go.
Yeah.
This is a very pro Dolly podcast, sir. So tread lightly, Nick. This is
have Dolly
Parton
all
the time.
The entire NHL awards. Dolly
That's
Parton's
an idea.
Queen of the state. Just give me like other things.
Well, the one thing Dolly will have to answer for at some point, she has a rare miss. Bryan, stay with me on this for a second.
Okay.
She advertised the Mexican pizza returning at Taco Bell, and was a part of this. It's like one of her favorites. My fiance loves the Mexican pizza. It's one of her favorites. It has been out of stock the entirety of the summer. We had it for like a week and a half, and then it disappeared. And they overpromised, like bringing it back, getting everybody all in, and then they did not have the means to keep the Mexican pizza going. It's a rare miss for Dolly. We have to be fair on this podcast.
I don't think she controls inventory there, Chase.
You got to ask questions though. If you're going to do the ad, you're going to be like, "Hey, how are we doing? Are we sure we can handle it this summer? People love the Mexican pizza. Can we do this?"
Yeah, so, real quick question about this, the draft. Like, who would be each of you? Like, who would be somebody that, one, you'd either be like really excited to see them be a part of it, or two, since it's in town, would you be excited to like meet? Nick,
from a hockey standpoint, or just like
anybody who might be there?
Let's see.
Like me, I wouldn't, if they have Kenan Thompson do it again, I'd kill to meet Kenan Thompson.
Oh, for sure. Let's see. Boy, I feel like you're gonna get like the Keith Urban again.
Luke Bryan, I feel like, is involved here.
Always.
I would say, I would like to hear Derrick Henry. I think Derrick Henry would be fun. I would like to get some Titans in there. I think, who else could be cool in Nashville? This is interesting. I have not, I don't know. Like, who would be good at, like, Chris Rock? Let's bring him back. We haven't seen him in a while hosting any award shows. We haven't seen any of that. Let's bring him in. Let's bring Chris Rock back in.
Yeah, can't wait for like the first Milan Lucic joke he makes where he just walks up and punches him in the face on stage too.
That's a possibility. See, there we go. Like, I am creating all sorts of entertainment ideas for the NHL award show. I don't know. So are y'all both planning to go? Is this something that you will attend?
I hope so. Yeah. Nick, I've already spoken to some people to see what's going to be available for us to be able to do coverage. So hopefully, yeah,
we got to lay the like the giant press row table out there throughout the week. I know you're probably planning something. I'm planning something. It's the wheels are spinning, but other than that, I think it'd just be fun to go for the experience. Me personally, I miss the 2003 draft. My family was out of town on vacation. It was the saddest trip to an amusement park I've ever been to because I was missing the draft in Nashville. So I'm very excited to go just to kind of see like the experience of being able to go see a draft, something new. And then the NHL awards, they've kind of sucked the past few years, but maybe you do some creative ideas. Maybe you kind of get the local flavor involved a little bit. You can make this fun. Like you can kind of revive the NHL awards. One thing that's very interesting. So in the press release that they put out, like they flat out said, yeah, Bridgestone Arena is going to host the NHL draft. They said Nashville's hosting the NHL awards. They didn't say where.
I was just looking at that. I'm like,
they didn't specifically say Bridgestone Arena is going to host the NHL awards. And because the draft is 2 days later, you can conceivably see it being somewhere else. Like maybe like they do the
Brentwood
Ryman.
Academy.
Yeah, like maybe they do the awards at the Ryman. That's like a whole thing. Maybe they go across the street to the Skirmerhorn or something like that. Maybe they do like on the banks of the Cumberland River right there at the end of Lower Broad. Like find
Grand Ole Opry, maybe?
Yeah. Opry, you could do the amphitheater there on the river.
Yeah. Like there's some creative possibilities there. And I feel like they intentionally kind of
left that vague.
Made a point to leave that blank just so they can have some time to think, okay, logistically, how can we do this? But there's some cool things I think you can do with that.
I think I'm not sure if because Ryman was my first thought too, but I'm not sure that they could fit enough people in, like especially for like the for having all those people there and stuff like that. But the Opry maybe, I think the amphitheater would be a cool idea if they really want to do the awards outside, which I don't know if I'd recommend.
Yeah, well, can you also convince a bunch of Scandinavians dressed in luxury suits to sit outside in a Nashville summer for 3 hours?
It's true, but good point.
Yeah, we'll see. Ultimately, a fun time, a good move. I think it will be well attended. It will be a fun time for all in Nashville. Bryan, there was a big signing by the Calgary Flames. What do you make of that? And with free agency nearly over, I mean, we got Phil Kessel still out there. Like, where you have free agency and this big signing for the Flames?
Yeah, I mean, so Kadri was a guy we talked about a few times that before the rest of the trades came in and signings, but he's came off of a really great season. He's obviously a player that's got some kind of a speckled history of things, but he's he had a career year. And so the Flames, after they lost Johnny Gaudreau, they lost who was the other person?
Matthew
Tkachuk, yeah, that's right. And
but Charlie wanted.
Yeah, that's right. Charlie wanted. So they got Kadri at was $7 million for 7 years, which maybe a little bit more than I was expecting for him, although I knew he was probably going to get a good price. So they replaced at least a piece. I think they also signed how do you say it? Mangiapane?
Mangiapane, yeah.
Mangiapane, yeah. They got him, which he's a great player. I completely forgot about like him being out there, on the market. And then they traded Sean Monahan to Montreal for future considerations. And if y'all haven't had a chance to look, the provisions for getting the first round pick or whatever for Monahan, there's like this massive list of conditions, and there's like 5 different scenarios where they could get it, and there's like 10 steps in each. And I'm not even going to go close into trying to figure out how to explain it, but it was just really interesting because usually contract stuff is just like, hey, 12 teams he doesn't want to go to, and that's about it. But it was interesting, and I think that Calgary's probably not going to get the production from this group like they did from Gaudreau and Tkachuk. But hey, they kind of they were able to kind of reload after this.
Conditions, man, have ruined a lot of these sports now, where you look at the picks and you're like, the NBA, like even NBA stuff where I'm tracking, I'm like, does this pick convey win? Okay, what are the parameters of this pick conveying? And like, what are we doing? Like every trade is so much more complicated now instead of just like first round pick. That's where it is. It's like you got to go through and you're like, oh my God, is this actually a first round pick? Is this actually going to turn into 2 seconds 3 years from now?
Yeah.
Hockey's the same way. Like it's just there's so many conditions, and you have to kind of be a capologist, or I need an intern who just focuses on the cap. So when I just, hey, what does this mean? Explain this to me like I'm 5. What were you about to say, Nick?
Oh yeah, no, I agree with that. It's like, oh yeah, if you play at least 15 minutes a night on every Tuesday from here on out, and score at least 1 assist per game on every day game, then this moves from a second to a gets like a first, and then you give them a third. It's chaos. Like it's a lot to keep track of. That's why I'm just like waiting till the season's over to be like, yep, this is the pick we plan.
Yeah.
Right.
But to Brian's point on Calgary, it's very weird to say this, but Calgary's had a pretty good offseason, all things considered. When you look and you see they lost their two best players from last year, that would cripple most teams. But the fact that they've been able to get up, they got Jonathan Huberdeau, who in his own right was kind of a fringe MVP candidate last year. They got him and locked him up to a long-term deal. They brought in Nazem Kadri, who is a very good, kind of your prototypical second-line center. And all of a sudden, you look at Calgary and it's like, okay, you know what? Maybe Gaudreau and Tkachuk, that loss is bigger than the sum of, bringing in Huberdeau and Kadri. But you've at least addressed a couple of big holes and replaced them with two very, very good players in their own right. And let's also not forget the other piece on that Matthew Tkachuk trade was Mackenzie Wieger, who is one of the most underrated defensive defensemen in the NHL. And I know Bryan is smiling and shaking his head because he is very, very well loved in the analytical community just because of his underlying numbers there. But you watch him play, you look at kind of the impact he has on the game. That is a very good get. That is like a top 2 quality defenseman that the Calgary Flames got. And you combine that with some of their other good defensemen like Noah Hannafin and, Rasmus Anderson. You put them in front of Jacob Markstrom, who is one of the best goalies in the NHL last year. Calgary's in it. Calgary's in that Pacific Division slobber knocker, and they could be a team that makes a lot of noise next year.
Yeah, it'll be very interesting to see. But yeah, like you said with Wieger, like he's one of those guys. It's like the same reason why I used to always really love Mark-Edward Vlasic for San Jose, just because he was that like shutdown defensive guy. But they're not, I don't know if they're going to hit that same level of where they were last season, but they've got the potential to do it. And then, they got some of these deals in, Kadri's locked up for forever. Huberdeau's locked up forever. So, they've got a lot, if you're going to have to get rid of guys, then you bring in guys that may not be as good, but you've got them under team control for a little bit longer. And, you've got a good direction as to where you want to take a franchise like that.
Yeah.
David Quinn also just going to San Jose went under the radar. That was like one of those like news dumps where no one really talked about it, but you're like, what is San Jose doing? Like they're kind of just in a weird spot. David Quinn just seems like a really weird hire for them. I don't know. Weird stuff with the Sharks right now.
Feels like there's been some weird stuff with the Sharks for like the past 3-4 years.
Yeah.
It seemed like you talk about a team like that desperately needed a rebuild. That's San Jose. And that's like one of the things I mentioned because of course there's a lot of Preds fans that are like they should tear it down. They should trade everybody and start over. You look at what San Jose has. Well, first off, look what Nashville has. 3 of their 4 highest paid players had career best seasons last year. One of whom did something no defenseman has done since like the early 1990s in terms of scoring. They have a Vezina candidate goaltender. That like a rebuild's not the problem for the Nashville Predators. You look at the San Jose Sharks, they are tying up a lot of money in Erik Karlsson, who's been bad for a good number of years. Logan Couture, who's hurt all the time. Like all of their players, they are just like investing money in left and right. They're all bad. Like they are having like mediocre to bad seasons. That's the team that needs a rebuild. Like that's the team you need to tear down. Like the Nashville Predators, you just need to build around the stars you have. You don't need to tear things down. San Jose needs to burn the house to the ground and rebuild the foundation.
Yeah, them, Chicago too, I think was putting it off for a really long time, and Chicago's finally there, it looks like. But that was one where it just you just did not know what they were doing.
I'm very excited to watch Chicago play a whole lot of games this season, and just like it would be awful
bad for a while, right? Like I don't see a path to them not being bad for years.
The only thing that would ruin the draft in Nashville last year is if Chicago wins the lottery.
Yeah,
and they get the fake, but you'll get the biggest boos and everything, from the crowd. So Yeah, I guess you're right. It's too bad that Charlie's not here, because Charlie is kind of one of those blow it up and start over guys. So,
But it's just like one of those things where we've talked about on this pod, and like y'all being the hockey experts, it's also just that like, look, you're in it, and there are years where hockey is just different than other pro sports, where you get hot at the right time, and like, yeah, there are the teams like the Lightning that are just whatever. They're that's just like a different type of breed, where it's like we knew the Lightning are going to be good going into the year, and then the Lightning are good, and it's like, whoa, the Lightning in the finals again. Who could have ever foreseen that?
Yeah.
But you look at the other thing where it's like the Maple Leafs do everything right every year. They build a team where you're like, this all makes sense. What a great team. This should, and it doesn't work. Like there is some sort of hex on the Toronto Maple Leafs that just it's not fair. Like what's happening to the Maple Leafs fans every year is just I couldn't imagine. So the blow it up crew, and to your point, Nick, it's a good core right now. Like this is like you were a playoff team last year. Obviously, you weren't even close with Colorado, and that was a really rough series. But like you don't know. Like the scoring will pick up. We talked about on the pod last week where we might get some lines that overperform. There will be guys who are younger who will be a year older. They pop a little bit more. We're going to see. I think there is more room to move up. The question that I think we have, and we haven't heard your opinion on this, is that like with Haslam moving in and with your GM being here as long as he has, getting up there in age, I don't think he's going to sign on for a rebuild. I don't think Bill Haslam is going to sign on as to a full teardown right out of the gate. He wants momentum. Most owners, when they come in, they're spin, spin, spin. Like we're darting in. I want to make a splash. They're not pivoting. They're not tearing it down to the bare bones. You do the bare bones before the ownership group comes in, where it's like we have no parts. You can do whatever you want to do when you come in, pay all the money. Like we're not going to be responsible for any contracts. You can spend, do whatever. I don't think the Preds are at that point. I don't think the Preds would ever even consider that kind of full teardown.
No. And David Poile, you mentioned he's towards the end of his career. He's not going to go out on a rebuild.
Yep.
He's not going to end his career as in like, well, let me just stockpile some first round picks and, a couple of guys that maybe work out. And then the next guy can have a good little run. David Poile is going to want to win a Stanley Cup. Something he hasn't done as an executive. Like he really believes. I mean, you saw it a couple of seasons ago where he had some opportunities to trade some guys that would have gotten him significant pieces. Guys like Nick Bonino and Craig Smith. He passed on a chance to trade them at the deadline. He passed on a chance to trade Matthias Ekholm famously last season. He held on to Ryan Ellis, until the offseason. And when you asked him, I mean, look at this year, Philip Forsberg. There's a lot of people that thought the Preds need to trade Philip Forsberg if he's not signed at the deadline. He held on to him. That worked out. Same thing with Mikael Granlund a year ago. He held on to him. That worked out. He really believes in this core. Like you hear him talk, when you hear him say, he's like, well, maybe conventional wisdom would say to trade him, but I don't want to. Like he's flat out said he doesn't want to trade these guys because he still thinks he can build a team around them. And, to his credit, he did try. Like up, sort of the late 2010s after that cup run, he did make some big, big swings to try to bring in a lot of good talent. It just didn't work out. And I think that's maybe where some of the distrust around Poile comes in for the Preds fan base. But I think you're seeing him this year take the right steps. I think bringing in Ryan McDonagh, there's maybe some debate about that contract and whether that's good for the Predators long term. But Ryan McDonagh is going to make that Preds defense better. Nino Niederreiter, when you look at the way the Predators play, is exactly the type of person you want playing on that second line. He does so much in so many different areas of the game. He is almost like a carbon copy of what the Predators' identity is. And he's going to be playing next to Ryan Johansson. And that pairing makes me very excited on a line.
Yeah.
There you go. Well, next up, major trades, our last major topic on this podcast today. Bryan, this was your idea. How do you want to frame this? How do you want to go about major trades involving the Preds, and what your research found?
Yeah, so I was gonna, speaking of talking about the big trades with Poyle and what he's done, previously, I wanted to look at some that have happened in the last 3 or 4 seasons, and let's give a retrospective grade on these type of things. And I'll start with a softball, one that we all panicked about last summer. I remember exactly where I was when I found out. I was sitting in the Adventure Science Center watching a movie in the planetarium, and all of a sudden my phone just heats up and just doesn't stop, and everybody's like, they traded Ryan Ellis. As you know, they traded Ryan Ellis, a guy who he signed that, was it $6 million deal, and his goal was to stay with the Predators for the rest of his career. And they traded him and got back Cody Glass and Philippe Myers. And so I wanted to start with you, Nick. Like, what do you think about that trade?
Well, maybe you should skip me because I was most excited for Phil Myers in that trade at the time. I was like, oh yeah, this is somebody who's going to fly under the radar. And boy, was I wrong. I was wrong on Luke Kunin this year too. But
yeah, well, we'll get to that one.
Yeah, it's hard to tell because we don't really know what Cody Glass is going to become in Nashville yet. And Ryan Ellis really hasn't been able to play any games in Philadelphia yet either, just because of his injury problems this year. Sounds like he might be healthy going into next season. So, maybe seeing him in Philadelphia and seeing what the impact is there. And then maybe Cody Glass may get another chance at being, kind of a full-time Preds player this year. Maybe we'll be able to grade it a little bit more. But, the Phil Myers thing, I think, leaves a very sour taste in everybody's mouth for this trade right now, where one of your two major pieces was in Milwaukee at the halfway point of the year and then, basically traded as a cap sweetener.
Yeah, it's I think right now we could probably say that it was a good move just for the fact that Ryan Ellis may not have been able to play this last season, even here in Nashville. And so we'll see where Cody Glass goes. I mean, I think maybe it's a push at this point, and we'll see.
And you get Ryan Ellis's contract off the books too.
Yep.
You have some more wiggle room.
Yeah. So, speaking of, well, let's see. Let's go back a little bit further because we saw that Kyle Turris yesterday announced that he's retiring from the NHL and he's going to go help coach. What's it like? I don't even remember what the league name is, but it's like a BCHL or something team up in Canada. Yeah. But we'll talk about that trade, the very famous 3-way trade that sent Kamenev and Sam Girard, one of my favorite guys, and a 2018 second round pick to see. They sent that to Colorado. Colorado sent Matt Duchene to Ottawa, and then Kyle Turris came to Nashville, where he signed a immediate 6x6 deal. I could probably ask either one of you this one. What you think of that trade?
Go ahead.
It's got to be up there in worst trades in franchise history. It's not quite as bad as the Cody Franzen debacle, but it's up there, and especially because you lose Sam Girard, who's all of a sudden looking like a really good long-term piece for the Colorado Avalanche. And reminder, he didn't even play much in the postseason. He was hurt for pretty much all of the postseason. So they did all that without a guy a lot of people consider one of their 4 best defensemen. So just imagine how good Colorado is going to be with Sam Girard. It's a shame Turris really didn't work out. For a while he did. Let's not forget, the first 6 months he was on the Preds, Kyle Turris was one of the best players on the Preds. And then, some injuries happened and some trades, and he just could never really find his mojo. But yeah, this has to go down as one of the worst trades. A, because of the contract you let Kyle Turris in, which you're going to be paying for the next several years. B, because you lose, a star prospect in Sammy Girard, who's proving to be a very good NHL player.
Yeah, they pay him $2 million a year until 2028. Yeah. And that's $2 million. They got about 2.4 million in space right now. They had that 2 million freed up. There's a Phil Kessel, there's somebody else, but they bought him out and he didn't catch on with Edmonton. So yeah, it wasn't a great trade. I
but was that a hindsight thing where at the time, do y'all remember what you were feeling? Did you feel like this was actually gonna just backfire significantly, and that you were giving up a star prospect, and this is what Girard was going to be, and injuries were going to be a question mark with Turris when he came in?
Not really. I mean, I liked Kyle Turris. I liked him as a player. He had a couple of good seasons with Ottawa, and maybe at the time you consider okay, maybe a little bit of an overpay, but at the time everybody thought this was a great trade. You don't necessarily need Sammy Girard because you already have a very strong top four. What you're really missing is a second line center. And remember, that was the year that Mike Fisher retired, so the Predators were kind of very desperate for center depth.
Yeah.
So at the time, yeah, there's a lot of people that said this was a great trade, something that the Predators can really kind of build around. It just didn't work out.
Yeah, it's unfortunate, but that's how it goes. A couple more, depending on how much. Actually, we can do some real quick ones. Nick Bonino being traded to the Wild for Luke Kunin.
I feel like Nick's got some takes on the Kunin trade.
I mean, it's fine. Fine. Because Nick Bonino didn't really do much in Minnesota either. And now he's in San Jose, also not really doing much. Which, fun fact, it looks like he and Luke Kunin are going to be on the same line next year in San Jose. So there's
Get the band back together.
Yeah. That's part of the reason and we'll get to this in a second, I'm sure, but this is part of the reason I wanted Kevin Fiala back to Nashville this offseason, was just to put him on the same line as Mikael Granlund and let the interwebs just lose their mind over it.
Well, speaking of that, what do you think about the trade of Kevin Fiala for Mikael Granlund? I think this one will be a little bit more of a difficult one.
Even? Like, I really do think it's even because I think both franchises got what they needed out of it. For Nashville, it took a while. Like, it really did take a while, but Mikael Granlund's probably one of the most underrated, important players on the Nashville Predators. Like, one of the players who is most critical to their success that's not often talked about. And then, you know what? Minnesota, they needed kind of a young, dynamic scorer to sort of build around. And, Kaprizov wasn't there yet when Fiala started taking off. Obviously, he comes in. He and Fiala have some good chemistry together. And, they had a dynamic kind of thing to build around. And when their cap struggles hit, they flipped Fiala for some good pieces to build for the future. So it's weird because, like, at the time, if you would have asked me, a year ago, maybe a year and a half, I would have said hands down, like, Minnesota pulled a heist on the Predators on this. But now, seeing the season Mikael Granlund had and how important he is for this team moving forward, I mean, you chime in too, Brian, but, like, I would say this is about 50-50.
I think, like you said, both teams got what they needed, I think, out of the trade. And, I mean, let's be honest, Kevin Fiala is a great talent, but he hit a wall in Nashville in his development. And I don't know if you want to attribute that to Peter Laviolette, if you want to attribute it to, Nashville not having a great record of developing the forwards that they draft. But you could just tell that it just wasn't quite all there for Fiala. And Granlund comes in and offers a different, I mean, he's not nearly as technically skilled or, just have that pure skill, talent that Fiala has. But I think it was a good move because, it was 1-for-1. It was just a good trade, and it made sense. And it gave Fiala a chance to kind of reinvent himself, which he had a pretty good couple of years in Minnesota. And his reward was to go to San Jose now. But I think it worked out really, really, really well for both teams because Mikael Granlund, I'm very glad that Nashville has him for a while.
Yeah, absolutely.
And then, I had one more, and then we can go off at this one. Something that we didn't even, I don't think anybody really talked about last season, even though we thought it was going to be a huge thing. The trade of Victor Arvidsson to LA for a second and a third. What do you think of that?
You know what? It's, you kind of mentioned Kevin Fiala hitting a wall here, and I kind of felt that way about Victor Arvidsson. I love Victor Arvidsson.
Mhm.
His jersey is still in my little jersey closet right here. One of my favorite Nashville Predators. Love the way he plays. Love his nose for the goal. Um, but it kind of became clear that once John Hines took over, it didn't seem like he was a fit, which is very weird because you consider the way Victor Arvidsson played and you consider the way, John Hines looks at some of his players, like a solid forechecking and a lot of speed, and how, guys like Tanner Jeannot have really taken over. It seems like he would have been a perfect fit for what John Hines wanted to do, but for some reason it just never clicked. And you could see, sort of towards the end where Victor Arvidsson's ice time just kind of, dwindled a little bit. He wasn't kind of the go-to guy anymore. And I feel like the Predators just needed to make a change. And
Yeah.
Victor Arvidsson needed to change. And Victor Arvidsson said it himself, like, in an article with the LA Kings. He's just like, you know what? Like, I enjoyed my time there, but I think we just needed fresh ideas, a fresh start. And that's fine. And, the Predators obviously this year had trouble filling that void on the second line. But, now you have an opportunity to go out and find somebody that fits more of what John Hines wants to do. And that's apparently what Nino Niederreiter comes into handy. And there's still some guys out there, either via trade or via free agency, that, hey, by this time at the trade deadline, Nashville might be kicking the tires on.
Yeah.
There you go. Bryan, that was fun exercise. That was good. I like it.
Good. I'm glad. I thought it was interesting. I wanted to get, especially Nick, I wanted to get your opinion on some of these because, I will say this, like, I bring this up because we have had plenty of justified criticism about the moves that David Poile has made. But I have to admit that, like, fairly recently, the last 3 or 4 years, there's been some good moves, or smart moves rather. Maybe they didn't completely improve the team immediately, but made sense. Like getting Ryan Ellis off the books, like that broke my heart, but it was, he was right on. He knew he probably had some insight on the fact that he was going to be injured, but it's still, he's done okay. I'm not too disappointed after the last, year and a half or so.
Mm-hmm. Yeah.
There you go. Nick, what can the good folks check out from you over on Locked On Preds and on the Forecheck this week?
Yeah, so next week we're going to be talking a World Junior Championships wrap up. We had a very good show with our buddy Eric Dene this week about some of the Preds. We're going to be talking just the tournament as a whole. Next week, we're also going to be doing some Central Division crossovers. Basically, we get the hosts from other Locked On channels. We did one already with Columbus. We did one, even though they're not in the Central Division anymore. We did one with Minnesota. We're going to try to do some with Arizona, who's in an interesting spot, Dallas, who's in an interesting spot. So we'll have a lot of content coming up this week. And we also got some fun stuff coming up on theforecheck.com as well. We're going to be doing player look-aheads. We're going to kind of give the expectations for every Preds player heading into the 2023 season. So be sure you're checking on theforecheck.com and also listening to Locked On Predators every weekday.
There you go. Also, Columbus is like just such a central area. Like Columbus not being in a central division is just weird. Like you just think about it and you're like, that's just when I think central US, like Columbus, it's just right there.
Yeah.
Bryan, what about you? What would you like to plug as we wrap up here today?
Yeah, so of course Nick covered the stuff that we're doing over it on the Forecheck. We're doing those player things. I've got to actually go in there and pick some players before I get stuck, doing a look ahead for Mark Borowiecki and who's that guy, John Leonard or something. I got to make sure I grab a couple of the great players. But there's that. I think I'm just hyping myself up because I'm realizing I was looking at my calendar and being like, oh, this starts real soon. So just kind of prepping for that, trying to figure out what we're going to do. And, there's lots of, I know that me and Charlie Saunier with the Renegades of Puck, I know we're getting ready to start up and start doing those post-game videos every game. So yeah, just keep a lookout for that. It's gonna be pretty awesome.
There you go. Bryan, Nick, thank you so much for making the time. And I will talk to you, Bryan, next week. Nick, we'll have to have you back on the show again soon.
For sure, Chase. Anytime. Thank you for having me.